Now, this is part A of the KhoodeelaarTV television channel dedicated to baby angel Geronimo and every aspect of the rights of the baby angel Geronimo are covered and diagnosed. This is the part A of the Baby Angel Geronimo editions of the KhoodeelaarTV campaign, dated the 12th of October 2021. We didn't broadcast any edition yesterday, Monday, 11th of October 2021. And the main reason is, of course, technical. And despite the fact that we didn't broadcast any editions yesterday, we have been posting comments and observations and assertions and updates on the main KhoodeelaarTV campaign platforms on social media, including Twitter. Now, this is the edition that is being broadcast about 12 hours later than we would have broadcast, but 12 hours meaning that we would have broadcasted in the morning. Now, the statement that we make, the world exclusive diagnosis of Fleet Street, applies whenever we broadcast and whatever date we broadcast the item or publish the contents. Can I just say to those people who are viewing this for the first time, that we have, on average, the contents each edition contains about 10,000 words at least. And one of the reasons why we do this in English is because the translations and kind of exchanges of the contents between various languages is not up to date yet. And so therefore we do this in English so that access is comparatively easier. And the other thing that we have to say to those who are viewing this for the first time is that we do say this for the record on the facts, that there is no outlet, despite the fact that we don't broadcast every single day. Essentially, we do broadcast 7 days a week, but sometimes we don't broadcast on a day or so. Despite the fact that we don't broadcast every single day, the theme, the agenda, the narrative, and the focus remain the same. The theme is that the Fleet Street newspapers, of which this is a part, essentially are platforms and media of lying and untruthfulness. For example, this is the front page, what is called page 1 lead in the daily bribing Boris graph, also known as whatever is shown on the banner. And this is not the item that should be there. Not as the page one lead. Why? Because although the actual numbers of the people who have been killed by Boris Johnson's policy, this is not the headline that should be there. And I shall illustrate the lies by Fleet Street shielding Boris Johnson by looking at the, well, this is the only London-based, that is Fleet Street paper, that has the 3 words that actually sum up the aspect of Boris Johnson's policy. That's the deadliest of delays. But even that is not really true, because and the next to the Daily Mirror, which is not part of the propaganda operation for the scum party, is of course the Guardian. And the Guardian is failing as well, not focusing. None of these, well, neither of these, the Daily Mirror and the Guardian, which are the only two, well, and the I paper, they're not naming Johnson, which is absolutely crucial. And the Daily Mail is, of course, even less concerned. It is showing its own afterthought about the elderly. What happened to these people dying was nothing short of massacre. And the Financial Times, of course, is opportunistically kind of half-hearted, saying herd immunity groupthink led to public health failure. Now, this is not true. It's not public health failure. It's the government deciding. The government fronted by Boris Johnson deciding to let thousands of bodies pile up in the air, in the whatever the phrase. And the Fleet Street newspapers are not telling the truth about what happened. So in the course of the week, in next kind of few editions, what we aim to do is to quote some of the key statements, but let's say that the statements themselves are attributed to the MPs. Now, the MPs are, what are the MPs? The MPs are chaired by a former member of the UK government, who was the member in post at the expense of health, Jeremy Hunt. Now, these are not the members of parliament, the people who are in the committee. The says that it's a joint report agreed unanimously by 22 MPs from the Conservative, Labour and Scottish National parties. Is the first authoritative investigation of the response to the pandemic ahead of the full public inquiry promised by Boris Johnson. The MPs accuse the government and its scientific advisors of groupthink that failed to take account of effective action to tackle COVID-19 taken elsewhere in the world. And it says that COVID-19 has been associated with more than 150,000 deaths in the UK, one of the world's highest tolls. And the Financial Times has got an editorial which is headed Lessons for All from the UK's COVID mishandling. Politicians and scientists succumb to flawed fatalist groupthink. Now, anyone who is familiar with the UK kind of quote media will be also familiar with the existence of private eye, which we call private lie, despite the hype. Now, although the publication, which is edited by a crook called Ian Pissoff, claims that it is not part of the Fleet Street lying because it has got a column called Street of Shame. The essential agenda and the narrative and the bias and the immorality that the private lie festers in and perpetrates are undistinguishable on all main issues from the contents of the narrative and the agenda of the main titles collectively known as Fleet Street. As I have said, the Financial Times is being in the headline, it's accommodating Boris Johnson. And the Daily Mail is shielding Boris Johnson, as is the I newspaper, and the Guardian and the Mirror are less shielding of the congenital liar Boris Johnson, who boasted at the time, as he was delaying the action that would have saved thousands of people. He said that let thousands of bodies pile. Now, this is the first report, and as it says, 22 MPs from three of the parties have agreed the report unanimously. There will be others. Now, we call these Baby Angel Geronimo editions. And the reason why we call these Baby Angel Geronimo editions is directly to do with the fact that for 4 years, the depraved UK government department, DEFRA, has been lying against Baby Angel Geronimo. And the fact that the government department has been lying is so significant and so significantly linked with the lies of the government about other issues, other duties the government is obliged to discharge to the public, is because if the government department is intentionally lying, intentionally engaged in lying about any aspect of the state of health or state of society, social care, then the public have no place else to go to seeking remedies and seeking service. All the papers in this is the main item on the front page of the Times, despite the fact that the Times doesn't live up to the claimed reputation as the newspaper of record. It is Murdoch Times, so therefore it's diluted, very seriously diluted, and it is part of the lying operation, propaganda operation that Rupert Murdoch controls through Rebecca Brooks. And on the top of the page 1 of the Times, is a small item. Britain must learn from big mistakes on COVID, says report. That is a lie, because these were not mistakes. These were intentional plot, or part of the intentional plot, intentional agenda to let thousands of people die. So collectively, it was a crime committed as a mass murder. And there is no mention of mass murder, there is no mention of intent, there is no mention of the criminal law concept of intent and the execution of the intended action. So Fleet Street is actually lying and perpetrating the lies and denials and cover-ups. Now there is this piece about this criminal who has been allowed to walk free from a court. And it describes her as an accountant who was found to be more than 3 times the legal alcohol limit after she crashed her car, has been cleared of drink driving after claiming that she downed vodka after the accident to calm her nerves. Now, we don't want to comment on the reason why she was allowed to. But it so this woman has been allowed to walk away, and there is another person involved in the court proceedings called Azad, and we shall investigate before making any conclusive remark whether the Kelsey Ridings, the name of the woman who has been allowed to walk away, was exonerated by the court because she is white. And we shall, as I said, but that is only a tip of the iceberg, because there is no fairness in the court system, which is most often racist, and in addition to that is incompetent and negligent. It's almost like the regime that Boris Johnson has been fronting. And there is no mention of the report at all on page 1 of the Telegraph. Now let's see. The Telegraph is, of course, the daily bribing Boris Johnson graph. And the fact that two of Johnson's so-called cabinet, Zahawi and Javid, were mistaken for each other by a white conservative scum MP, illustrates the point about the corruption and the racist criminality and denial. And here is a piece on the Sarah Everard kind of impact. And it's a comment based on the former president of the Supreme Court, who has said that police posing a danger to women is nothing new, but the Sarah Everard case has gained attention because she was a young, beautiful, middle-class white woman, Baroness Hale of Richmond has said. Now, this woman was the president of the Supreme Court following the retirement of David Neuberger, who was the first president of the Supreme Court. So, what this first woman president of the Supreme Court is saying is that violence against women is not given the attention that it deserves. And there is a piece underneath that one, which is headed Worst Performing Police Force Solves Just One in 140 rape cases. And it says the only one in 140 rapes are being solved in the worst performing police force. Figures a rape victim's chances of their attacker being prosecuted can double depending on which side of a street they live, the data reveal. Only 0.7% of rapes reported to Wiltshire police resulted in a charge or summons, according to Home Office data. For the 3 years from 2018 to 2021, the best performing force, Durham, had more than 10 times the success rate, with 7.1% of rapes resulting in a charge. Now, notice this 7.1% is being hailed as the best. So, 92.9% of rapes are being allowed to go unacted on. So that's the other piece on the same page, page 9 of the Daily Bribing Boris graph, is that a victim who is a disc jockey, a woman, says that she was flashed by cousins, the same one who kidnapped, raped, and murdered Sarah Everard. And the police laughed at her. She is a woman described as age 50, a Magic FM disc jockey known by her stage name, Emma B, has waived her right to anonymity to say she believes she was sexually harassed by the former police 13 years before he murdered Sarah Everett. She said that she is speaking out because when she reported the incident to the police, they laughed when I was describing the graphic bits and what he was doing. They thought that bit was particularly funny. He flashed at her and they thought that it was funny. The reason why I'm saying something is because now a girl is dead. I have a daughter who's at university. As a mother, I'm thinking if somebody didn't say something and that resulted in my daughter's death, I wouldn't be able to live with that. Mrs. Wilson has complained to the force, which has confirmed that officers from its professional standard team are assessing the incident. Over the weekend, another alleged victim claimed that Cousins, the kidnapper, the rapist, and the murderer of Sarah Everett, had molested him 3 years before the murder in Deal, Kent. The drag performer alleges he was in costume when Cousins started molesting him at a bar. Before Cousins propositioned him to have sex in an alley, detectives were conducting inquiries. Jamie Klinger of Reclaim These Streets praised Mrs. Wilson's bravery in speaking out. Now, this is the piece that the Dirty Digger Murdoch scum is running. Instead of the piece that should have been running about the MP's report on the Johnson role in the Johnson's role in the deaths and massacres of the thousands of people. And if that was not bad enough, they're attacking a climate change protester. And on page 2, they are praising Boris Johnson. Instead of saying that Boris Johnson allowed the thousands to be massacred, they're saying from bad job to good jab. This is the insanity of the lying Fleet Street. So when we say that this is part of the Baby Angel Geronimo editions, we include the fact that the Fleet Street has, without any exception, repeated the lies that depraved DEFRA has been perpetrating against Baby Angel Geronimo for 4 years. Every single one. Every single one of the lies against Baby Angel Geronimo has been repeated by the depraved Fleet Street. And they haven't quizzed the depraved DEFRA or the depraved George Injustice, nor have they put questions to the congenital liar, Boris Johnson, who has been colluding and colluding with the depraved DEFRA and condoning the depraved DEFRA's intentional criminal lies against baby Angel Geronimo. So it's not like Boris Johnson has been caught being cruel and murderous or murderously negligent about the victims of the intentional lack of action to protect people from the COVID virus at the beginning. It's part of what Boris Johnson is like. He is a congenital liar. And it's not congenital liar. This phrase is not mine. The phrase is used against Boris Johnson, about Boris Johnson, by the official ambassador for France in the UK, who has now retired. And the detail of this findings is actually taken from two reports. One is a report by a committee chaired by Jeremy Hunt, and the other is a report by a committee chaired by Greg Clark, both of them conservatives. And here is a comment by the Guardian writer Peter Walker. He is saying that the MP's answers on what may be biggest crisis since the war, by the war they mean the 1939-1945 war, European war, are damning, but maybe just a start. And he says in the first paragraph, it might not have been the immediate public inquiry sought by opposition parties and bereaved families, but the landmark joint report into the UK's handling of COVID proved less toothless than some had feared. Published almost a year to the day since the MP's inquiry was first announced, the Lessons Learned to Date report, prepared by two Commons committees, is not short on lessons, some of them expressed with notable bluntness. The delay in disposing the first lockdown last spring was one of the most important public health failures the United Kingdom has ever experienced. Planning for a possible virus outbreak smacked of British exceptionalism. The lack of early testing capacity was an almost unimaginable setback. We shall go into that a bit more in this edition, during this edition. So what Peter Walker is saying, in the last three paragraphs, he says, While Johnson has promised a full public inquiry, it will not begin until the spring at the earliest. It was this delay which prompted Hunt and Clark to launch their own process. It was, however, always a process with a limited scope and beset with political compromises. So while many failings are outlined, they are generally institutional. There is nothing in the report likely to hasten the end of a ministerial career, or even to prompt an urgent question in Parliament. This isn't enough, one MP involved in the process said. We owe it to the families of those who died to get to the bottom of who got it wrong. And that needs a public inquiry. Now, let me just say about public inquiries. Unless a public scandal convinces a member of parliament or a prime minister like Harold Macmillan, who resigned over the Profumo scandal, Christine Keeler scandal. Profumo lied, and Christine Keeler was one of the several innocent victims of Profumo's lying. But the scandal was very widely reported. And Harold Macmillan, when compared to the character of Johnson, was a person with a conscience. So he resigned. And the Profumo scandal didn't, as far as can be found, cause the death of anyone other than Stephen Ward, who was actually framed and was a victim of a pressure, and he committed suicide. So that's not his fault, nor the fault of Christine Keeler. But Profumo scandal generally didn't cause any massacre. Imagine what Harold Wilson would have done if even 10 people were killed because of the negligence on the part of his government. So it is a measure. The thousands of people who have been massacred since the 1960s because of the avoidable delay in taking appropriate action by the government, another conservative government like Harold Macmillan. So there is no standard. There is no accountability. There is no standard. There is no holding to account. In fact, in the context of this report and the findings on the various institutional, as Peter Walker kind of concedes, he shouldn't concede, but he does concede. That shows the Guardian's own editorial policy. The behavior of the depraved DEFRA and the behavior of the depraved DEFRA personnel who have been conspiring against Baby Angel Geronimo for years. This is not institutional, this is identifiable. And the fact that none of these criminals, conspirators, has been even moderately told off shows the state, the the government departments as fronted by Boris Johnson is in darkness. Because although Baroness Hale says that Sarah Everard was in the news because she was white, middle class, beautiful, etc. And that she is glad that Sarah Everard's murder and rape and kidnap was receiving the attention that it was receiving. She doesn't say anything about the state of the Supreme Court, where she was the president, first woman president, or of the rest of the court bureaucracy. Because there is nothing in the court bureaucracy that holds the criminals like Murray, Griffiths, and Stacey, the three judges so far who have offered their services as rubber stamps in the serial criminality confected by the depraved DEFRA against Baby Angel Geronimo. So Baroness Hale fails. And so she doesn't bring out of darkness the state of the judiciary, which is absolutely corrupt and criminal. Now, the Daily Mirror says in the subheading that Johnson could have saved thousands by locking down just days earlier. But it doesn't say Johnson, it says PM. Now, as we have said, the word PM, or the two initials PM, elevate Johnson to a level that he doesn't deserve. And this is the 2-page spread. It was not a fatal mistake. And the Daily Mirror has got on the next page after the 2-page spread. It was not a fatal mistake because it was an intentional decision to let thousands die. It is not subject to the MPs saying that Johnson did say it or not. It has been said and Johnson has not credibly been found to have not said it, because everything else connects to the fact that he had that attitude. And taking everything into account, everything about Johnson's behavior and attitude into account, they're condemning that he's gone to holiday while Britain's in crisis. And this is the other one that we have been talking about the Metropolitan Police allegedly dropping the alleged investigation into the American woman who was raped by Andrew 3 times. Because the London Metropolitan Police, which has been under reporting focus around the kidnapping, raping, and the murdering of Sarah Everett by a policeman in post. Now, it was never, the police force never actively took the allegations against Andrew seriously at all. So if there was no interest, that is, there was no active interest by the London Metropolitan Police in investigating Virginia Roberts' allegation that she had been raped by Andrew, then the fact that the papers are saying that the Metropolitan Police dropped the allegations inquiry into Andrew's behavior is absolutely a double lie. They were never investigating, so they could not be dropping. What they have been doing in the last let's say, few weeks is creating a scenario whereby they could say that they were investigating. But the report about the alleged dropping of the investigation has been already condemned and proven as untrue. And there are so many crimes of violence against women and so many criminals being allowed to get away that no amount of coverage will come anywhere near telling the truth. Now, this is the criminal who was allowed last year. I mean, he stalked an 88-year-old woman. Sorry, he raped an 88-year-old woman, and he was freed last year. So there are pictures of two sex offenders against women. And a woman called Hannah Brady of the COVID-19 Bereaved Families for Justice group said the MP's report So this is the piece about the on page 5 of the Guardian. We shall be, as I said, continuing to look at all the public statements. Further criticism is leveled at poor protection in care homes for Black, Asian, and ethnic minority groups and for those with learning disabilities. As we assert on the evidence, there is no environment of audit for the government or for government department or the ministers, and there is no auditing of elected individuals like members of parliament or local councillors, or as in the case of the now 5 London boroughs, plagued by 5 elected crooks as elected mayors. Croydon is undergoing the degeneration process, but it is now going to be as degenerate as the 4 boroughs, Lewisham, Tower Hamlets, Hackney, and Newham, that are lumbered with the crooked elected mayor post. So let's look at the Financial Times, which has the phrase hard immunity in the heading. And look at the lead paragraph, which leaves out Boris Johnson. And I'll come to that aspect after reading this first paragraph. The government and scientists made a fatalistic decision by backing a strategy that amounted to hard immunity in the early stages of the coronavirus pandemic, costing many thousands of lives in one of the most important public health failures the UK has ever experienced, a parliamentary inquiry has concluded. Now, this is where I refer to the private eye. This is what private eye did at early stage. Private eye in the first political kind of page of the particular issue said that elderly should be allowed to die. That is what it said. And the reason I'm mentioning that is that Private Eye, edited by Ian Pissoff, claims to have a critical, ethically, morally, democratically, accountably, transparently critical outlook about the behavior, the role, and the contents of the main Fleet Street outlets. And this is now what? April, May, June, July, August, September, October. Now, 18 months, more than 18 months since the Private Eye said that let elderly die of COVID-19 without being given priority or protection. And for 18 months, I've been looking every day for one single reference to that assertion by Private Eye. There is none. There has been none. So while it is factually important that even these 22 MPs have agreed this unanimous report, that is not enough by any means whatsoever. And it says COVID has been associated with more than 150,000 deaths in the UK, one of the world's highest tolls. Though, as the report notes, comparisons of mortality rates are not straightforward. So the report is not as comprehensively truthful as it should be, or as it is being painted by at least the Daily Mirror and some like the Glasgow Daily Record, which we have posted about during the day on our Twitter account and the Facebook account, I think. And the Financial Times says the country was slower to lock down in March 2020 than several other European nations, and made an inexcusable oversight by failing to launch a successful test and trace operation as many East Asian countries did. Another oversight was failing to impose strict border control early, which would have reduced the spread of COVID by travelers. Greg Clark, chair of the Science and Technology Committee, said they acquitted scientific advisors of deliberately following a policy of herd immunity. But there was a degree of fatalism that made it an inevitable outcome, given the limited testing capacity at the time and a widespread view that the public would not accept a lockdown for a significant period. The MPs pointed out that of the 87 people involved in at least one SAGE meeting, 86 were from UK institutions. And that is, a degree of groupthink meant we were not as open to approaches being taken elsewhere, such as earlier lockdowns, border controls, and effective test and trace, as we should have been, they said, adding that the ministers should have questioned the assumptions behind any scientific advice. Now, that is directly again relevant to the criminal, lying, depraved DEFRA program of lying and lies against baby angel Geronimo. If that is extrapolated in terms of relationship between scientific advisors and government ministers, then the scientific advisor in this context includes Christian Middlemiss, and the minister concerned is, of course, the depraved George Injustice himself. And the relationship is too corrupt and too criminally, untenably close in perpetrating and pursuing for too long a campaign of lies and lying against baby angel Geronimo. So as this kind of report in the Financial Times admits, in effect, there is a culture of no accountability, culture of negligence and lack of care and cruelty and the complicity with the program of massacre. So the agenda against baby angel Geronimo for the last 4 years is an agenda that would have been unsustainable, unsupportable, untenable, unacceptable, and would have been stopped and should have been stopped if there were across the government a culture of accountability, a culture of respecting life, a culture of respecting the truth, none of which, that is the absence of the culture of respecting life, upholding the life, the duty was not recognized by either Murray or Griffiths or by Stacey, the three so-called High Court judges that behaved as colluders with the conspiracy against the baby angel Geronimo. And let's say those people, the thousands that have been massacred, were going to be alive, means that they were healthy. They needn't have died. They shouldn't have died. They should not have been massacred. What kind of government is it? So none of the coverage, even the moderately critical coverage in the Financial Times or in the Guardian piece by Peter Walker, let's say, is going into the lack of ethics, the lack of morality in the government. Okay, so this is the Financial Times editorial, lessons for all from the UK's COVID mishandling. And the Financial Times is stupid because it is still falsely relying on the still fantasy inquiry that Johnson has promised. That inquiry hasn't started even. So the Financial Times is lying in saying that there is a lesson for all from the UK's COVID mishandling. What lesson? The Financial Times is shielding the congenital liar Johnson. Not only is it shielding, but it is treating the congenital liar as an authoritative source of investigating, seeking for the truth. That inquiry has not even begun. So it's the mark of this woman, Rola Khalaf, complicit with the criminal career of Boris Johnson. So when we say that Boris Johnson, in his complicity and condoning of the depraved DEFRA conspiracy against baby angel Geronimo, represents evil, we don't make up. This is the piece in the Daily Mail on pages 6 and 7 about Ruthie Henshaw. Now, she is an actress and she campaigned for better care home visiting rights during the pandemic as she watched her mother's health deteriorate. And the headline to that piece is Ruthie's fight to hold her mother's hand. Miss Henshaw, 54, said her mother Gloria, who lived in a home in Suffolk before her death in May, aged 88, had been starved of human affection by cruel visiting limits. Notice the words. She told how her family were angry and devastated by restrictions placed on visits. In March, when guidelines allowed residents one named visitor, Miss Henshaw was able to be in the same room as her mother and to hold her hand for the first time in a year. Quoting Ruthie Henshaw, "It will remain one of the most beautiful days of my life," she said, "because I had fought so hard for that moment. And it meant so much. It was incredibly moving." Miss Henshaw added some home providers abused residents' human rights to meaningful contact with loved ones because the guidance to allow a named visitor was not law. But they let down by sage groupthink, says the Daily Mail. But it has a piece peddling the British government. That is the corruption of the Daily Mail. That's where it says the UK helps save lives. It doesn't say that the UK massacred thousands. That massacre cannot be replaced or compensated for by any means ever by any number of other people being allegedly saved. And the Guardian says that the key findings from a scathing Commons report, and its heading is Extraordinary Omission. That is a lie. So what we are saying is that the Fleet Street collectively, including the Guardian and the Daily Mirror, is unable to tell the truth, report the truth. Where do these people come from? Those who write the headlines and the paraphrasing edited stuff, where do they come from? Do they actually exist among the population? Did they exist? Did they live? Did they prevail? Did they kind of belong biologically, physically to the population during the time that they're now reporting about? How can they say this was an omission? It was not an omission. It is a criminal commission. As in the case of the depraved DEFRA lies confected regularly for years against baby angel Geronimo, they were regularly lying, they were intentionally lying, they were alert, and they were actively lying against a most healthy individual, baby angel Geronimo, the most innocent baby angel Geronimo. How could they do it? How could the depraved DEFRA do it? Nobody existed to stop them within the depraved DEFRA, within the government, within the cabal fronted by the congenital liar, Boris Johnson. And the so-called first president of the Supreme Court, Lady Hale, she didn't exist. Or her counterpart or her kind of follower in post as president didn't exist. No court procedure exists to stop massacring government, lying government. And that is why the duties as owed to, no, let's put it differently. The duties as owed by the UK government as the signatory to the international declarations, conventions, treaties, charters, agreements, those duties come in. And all of those duties are routinely violated and breached by the depraved DEFRA. And they were breached by the counterparts in other departments. And despite the fact that the 22 MPs reportedly have signed this, the MPs are not doing their job themselves. It shouldn't have been 18 months later. The MPs should have been voicing. All the MPs should have been voicing the concerns of the people being violated and being denied and being neglected and being massacred as they were being massacred, neglected, denied, and violated. And there is no evidence in the contents of the Fleet Street papers that they recognize the rights of the people, the targets of government negligence and cruelty and lack of care as these were being perpetrated at the time. Now there is this page 3, which contains a letter from the so-called editor, Oliver Duff. He is a daft. He's as daft and idiotic and corrupt and this is repeating the lies that Andrew has been peddling. And the I newspaper is complete, stuffed with lies and contradictions. Anyone who lives in Africa or Asia and kind of believes in the hype about the quote British press must be told, as I am telling them, that the hype is a lie, a pack of lies. That the British press is full of lies. Now, for the people in Africa and Asia and other parts of the world, the fact that thousands of British people were massacred by the British government, choosing not to act to protect them, should be enough to take away the lying cover of the myths. The myths that are kind of given unjustifiable legitimacy by the likes of the first woman president of the Supreme Court, who is saying that the fact that Sarah Aberrant was beautiful, from middle class and white, was getting the attention. There are many victims of the government's massacre, COVID massacre, who were middle class as well and white. And you have to read very carefully every single piece in the Financial Crimes to know how it is subtly lying. This piece is about employment studies, and the heading is Labor Market Research Wins Nobel Prize for Economists. And the first paragraph by Delphine Strauss reads, 3 US-based economists have won this year's Nobel Prize for their work on real-world experiments that challenged received ideas, including by showing that raising minimum wages need not hurt jobs and that immigration does not always cut pay for native-born workers. This is completely criminal by the Financial Times. When it says always, it doesn't always cut native-born workers' wages or pay. It says that it does do that at other times. That's not true. Because in the fiercely racist kind of environments, hostility that exist in Britain, in the Western Europe, and in North America against migrant workers, most basic rights are denied to them. So the human rights is under violation at all points for migrant workers. That's a given. That's not what is evident in that paragraph, first paragraph of the Financial Crimes. And the same thing is, raising minimum wages need not hurt jobs. That's stupid. Wages could not be raised high enough or highly enough. And even if they were raised to levels higher than has been demanded by campaigners, the owners of the means of production, let's say, the capitalists, still would be in profit.